Welcome to Kanerika's podcast, The Digital Shift. In March 2026, the enterprise tech world practically froze.
Oh, it really did. Everyone was just kind of holding their breath.
Yeah, and we are talking about IBM dropping $11 billion to acquire Confluent. $11 billion.
It is a staggering number. I mean, it's the GDP of a small island nation.
Right. And if you are just a casual observer of the software industry, you might be sitting there wondering why a massive tech giant is spending that kind of money just to own a real-time data streaming platform.
Exactly. But if you have been paying attention to enterprise AI and, the very real struggles companies are facing right now, you know exactly why they did it.
Because they finally realized that the data layer has become the ultimate bottleneck. It is literally holding enterprise AI back from its true potential.
It is the absolute core of the problem right now. We are at a point in the industry where the AI models themselves, like the neural networks, the large language models, they are incredibly capable.
Oh, they are brilliant.
They are. But an AI model, no matter how advanced, is completely reliant on the context it is fed. It operates in a vacuum, essentially.
So if your enterprise data is, say, fragmented across different departments.
Or if it's sitting in stale silos, yeah. Or if it lacks clear, universal business definitions, then that AI decision-making just breaks down entirely.
You end up with a classic garbage in, garbage out scenario.
Exactly, but amplified on a massive automated scale.
Right, which makes the stakes higher than ever before for everyone listening. So for today's deep dive into this content, we are unpacking the profound impact of what we call the AI-driven data fabric.
It is such a crucial topic.
It really is. We are going to explore what this architecture actually is and how it is fundamentally revolutionizing data platforms. And don't worry, we won't get bogged down in the overly technical minutia.
Nobody wants a textbook lecture today.
Definitely not. We will also cover the very real roadblocks you will face when implementing it and the massive operational impact we at Kanerika are seeing across major industries.
Because it really is a paradigm shift in how we think about information. If we look at the root problem that an $11 billion acquisition is trying to solve, it always comes back to corporate data fragmentation.
Always. It is the age-old problem.
Yeah. In 2026, we are seeing multi-agent AI systems failing out in the wild. And to be clear, they aren't failing because the algorithms are poorly coded.
Or because the math is wrong.
Right, the math is fine. They were failing because different autonomous agents are operating on entirely different definitions of reality.
Okay, let's ground that in reality for a second.
Yeah?
When you say different definitions of reality, you mean they're literally looking at the same company but seeing two completely different pictures?
Yeah. Think about a core business metric that every single company uses, like revenue.
Revenue, right. Simple enough.
You would think so. But say you have one AI agent working in the finance department. That agent defines revenue as net.
Meaning after discounts, returns, taxes, all of that.
Exactly. But then you have another AI agent in the sales department, and it defines revenue as gross.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the problem.
Yeah, so what happens when those two agents are asked to collaborate on a Q4 forecast?
It would be a disaster. The system's decisions become entirely untraceable.
Completely. The finance agent pulls back spending because it thinks margins are incredibly tight. Meanwhile, the sales agent greenlights a massive ad spend because it thinks revenue is booming.
And they are both technically right based on their own definitions.
Precisely. The architecture underneath the models is where this fragmentation lives, and that is exactly what the AI-driven data fabric is designed to fix.
But if these AI agents are essentially working from different dictionaries, how do we force them into the same room to agree on terms? Do we have to rebuild the whole database from scratch?
No, thankfully you don't rebuild the database. Instead, the data fabric shifts integration from being a passive connection layer into an active intelligence layer.
Okay, so it's not just a dumb pipe anymore.
Exactly. In the past, a data pipeline just moved numbers from point A to point B. The AI-driven fabric changes that through three vital architectural components.
Let's break those down. What is the first one?
The first is active metadata. Historically, relying on a human to manually update a data catalog meant the catalog was outdated the second they hit save.
Because the business moves too fast.
Right. Now, the AI automatically generates metadata by actively observing how the data moves and, importantly, how humans are actually querying it.
So instead of a data steward writing down what a table means, The AI is basically looking over the shoulder of the analysts.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it sees that every time the marketing team pulls user ID, they join it with a recent purchases table, and the AI automatically tags those two data points as connected.
That is the exact mechanism. It learns from real behavior, not just static definitions, which naturally leads to the second component,
Which is?
knowledge graphs and semantic layers. This is all about connecting isolated tables into relationship graphs.
So, moving away from just staring at rows and columns.
Right. Instead of just seeing a flat row of transaction data in a spreadsheet format, the system links a customer node to their transactions, to their customer support history, and even to their specific contract terms.
It's essentially building a social network, but for your company's data.
A social network for data. I love that.
It's not just a list of names. It understands who is friends with whom and, who interacts with what.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. It creates a unified conceptual object that the AI can actually read and understand. And the third pillar of this fabric is embedded governance.
Security. Always the fun part.
Always. But this is crucial. It moves security upstream. The access controls, the privacy masking, the permissions, they travel with the data itself at the cellular level.
Rather than just being applied as a flimsy password at the final reporting dashboard.
Exactly. It's baked in.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So taking all three of those pillars, it's basically like hiring a team of brilliant experts, those are your AI agents, who don't speak the same language and don't share the same company rulebook. And the Fabric acts as the universal translator and the rulebook combined. It ensures everyone is perfectly aligned before anyone even makes a move.
And because those rules are baked into the data layer, the AI literally cannot accidentally bypass them.
Okay, so we know what the Fabric is conceptually, but theory is only useful if it can be applied. If I am an IT leader listening to this deep dive right now, I need to know how this is actually being built in the real world today.
Absolutely. Well, looking at our industry insights, Microsoft Fabric has clearly emerged as the most complete commercial implementation of this architecture.
They've really taken the lead on this.
They have. By FabCon 2026, they had over 31,000 enterprise customers actively using it. It has evolved significantly.
It is definitely no longer just an analytics platform.
No, it acts as a unified control plane for an organization's entire data estate.
And the absolute foundation of that Microsoft ecosystem is OneLake.
Yes, OneLake is the core.
But how does it actually manage all that data without creating a massive clogged bottleneck?
So OneLake provides a single logical data lake for the whole enterprise. But the mechanical brilliance of it is that it uses features called shortcuts and mirroring.
Shortcuts. How do those work?
Traditionally, if you had data in Amazon Web Services, data in Snowflake, and data in an Oracle database, you had to build complex pipelines to copy all of that data into one central location.
Which costs an absolute fortune in egress fees.
A fortune. And it creates multiple versions of the truth. But shortcuts allow OneLake to access that external data directly without forcing physical duplication.
So it just creates a pointer to the data where it already lives.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to push back on this because if I'm a chief information security officer, alarms are going off in my head right now.
No, I'm sure they are. Let's hear it.
If OneLake leaves data scattered in its original locations like AWS, Oracle, Snowflake, and just creates shortcuts to it, doesn't that make governance a complete nightmare? How do you secure data you don't physically hold in your own centralized vault?
That is the most common pushback we hear, and it is a completely valid concern. But this is exactly why that third pillar we discussed, embedded governance, is the linchpin of the whole operation.
Okay, tell me how that fixes it.
The governance sits at the fabric level, not the storage level. Because the fabric acts as the singular unified access plane, any query, whether it comes from a human analyst or an autonomous AI agent, has to pass through that fabric layer first.
Right, it's the gateway.
Yeah. So the security policies, the compliance labels, the row-level restrictions, they are enforced dynamically by the fabric before the query even reaches AWS or Oracle.
So it doesn't really matter where the data physically lives because the fabric controls the only door into the room.
Exactly.
So the fabric is the bouncer, and it checks your ID before you can even look at the data, regardless of what building that data is stored in.
That is it exactly, the bouncer. And once that foundation is secure, you layer on Fabric IQ and Graph in Fabric.
And those are the tools that provide the shared meaning we talked about earlier.
Right. They ensure an AI produces a trusted, contextually accurate decision, not just a technically plausible hallucination.
Which leads right into the AI agents themselves, which are fully integrated into this environment now.
It's amazing to see.
We're talking about data agents that can reason over unstructured PDFs, like legal contracts and structured SQL tables simultaneously.
And even more impressively, operations agents that can take autonomous action on real-time data streams.
That is a massive leap forward.
It really is. It's the difference between an AI that simply answers a question in a chat box and an operations agent that actively monitors a global supply chain, detects a weather disruption, and proactively reroutes maritime shipments.
Without waiting for a human to type in instructions.
Completely autonomously.
And, bridging that gap, taking a company from legacy silos to an autonomous AI fabric is exactly what we at Kanerika do every day.
Yeah, it's our bread and butter.
We are building these highly complex architectures for over 100 enterprise clients as a Microsoft Fabric featured partner.
Because it is one thing to read a white paper about OneLake. It's an entirely different beast to actually migrate a massive 30-year-old legacy system onto it without breaking the business.
The migration phase is undoubtedly the most painful part for any enterprise.
Oh, absolutely. You are dealing with decades of technical debt, custom-coded extraction layers, and fragile pipelines that, frankly, nobody in the company remembers how to fix.
Which is exactly why we rely on our FLEAP accelerator. When we go in to convert legacy pipelines to these modern Fabric-native workflows, the traditional approach would be putting an army of engineers in a windowless room for 6 months.
Just manually rewriting SQL queries all day.
Right. Instead, our FLEP accelerator uses advanced models to read the legacy code, understand the logic, and automatically translate those relationships into Fabric-native formats.
It's incredible. It reduces the migration effort by a staggering 75%.
We are compressing timelines from months down to mere weeks. And once that clean foundation is laid, we deploy enterprise AI agents. Like we deploy our agent Carl for instant data insights.
Where you can literally just talk to your database in plain English.
Exactly. And DocGPT for instant document intelligence across unstructured files.
But we really need to ground this in some hard numbers because the operational impact of this shift is massive.
Let's do it. What does the data look like?
If we look at our own data from a recent Kanerika case study, we worked with a global logistics provider. They were practically crippled by an incredibly inefficient Azure data lake.
Crippled how?
Well, they had petabytes of data, but their data models were completely inadequate. When an analyst ran a query, the system had to scan massive amounts of irrelevant data just to find one simple answer.
Ouch.
Yeah, which led to high processing times, bloated compute costs, and very real security vulnerabilities.
Wait, so the Azure Data Lake wasn't the problem itself, it was how the data was modeled inside it, because they essentially built a data swamp instead of a data lake.
Exactly. It was a complete dumping ground. But by stepping in, restructuring their architecture, and optimizing those data models into a unified semantic fabric, we delivered a 98% improvement in data processing efficiency.
98%. That means they were essentially processing data at a walking pace, and we put them in a bullet train.
The shift was transformational. Queries that used to take hours were suddenly executing in seconds. Because the fabric knew exactly where the data was via the knowledge graph, it didn't have to scan the whole lake.
Yeah, and that leads to cost savings, right?
Massive savings. This led directly to a 31% decrease in data processing compute costs and a 55% boost in overall operational efficiency.
Do we have a dollar amount on that?
We do. For this specific client, that translated to an average annual logistics savings of $1.2 million.
That is hard, undeniable ROI. And we aren't just seeing this play out in logistics, right? The impact is cascading across every major sector.
Oh, absolutely. Look at financial services.
Yeah, we are seeing real-time fraud detection with significantly fewer false positives. Why? Because instead of just looking at a single transaction in a vacuum, the AI can traverse the knowledge graph to understand the entire context.
It sees the transaction, the user's historical location data, and their typical vendor relationships, all in milliseconds.
It's wild.
Yeah.
What about other industries?
We see a similar leap in healthcare. An AI-driven fabric allows for HIPAA-compliant, cross-system patient data access.
Oh, that's huge for providers.
It is. The embedded governance ensures that a clinician gets exactly the specific data they are authorized to see for treatment. Meanwhile, an AI agent building broad population health models uses that exact same data source.
But the fabric automatically masks the personally identifiable information before the AI can see it.
Exactly. You don't need to build two different databases. The fabric handles the context dynamically.
And my absolute favorite is manufacturing. Imagine a cargo ship gets stuck in a major canal. In 2023, humans would spend 3 days cross-referencing Methy Excel sheets and calling suppliers just to see which critical parts were trapped on that ship.
It was a nightmare.
But today, an operations agent sees the news alert, checks the fabric graph, instantly identifies the delayed parts, and autonomously drafts a purchase order from a secondary supplier in a different hemisphere.
All before the human supply chain manager has even poured their morning coffee.
Exactly. The response time is cut from days to literally hours.
And in a globalized economy, that level of agility is a massive competitive advantage.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here for a second. With 98% efficiency gains and million-dollar savings sitting on the table, the natural question any listener is asking right now is, why isn't every single company doing this immediately?
It's a fair question.
What is the catch?
The catch is that the roadblocks to transformation are incredibly steep. It's not easy. The first major hurdle is legacy federation gaps.
Meaning what exactly?
Well, modern SaaS applications and cloud databases plug into a data fabric very easily. But if you are a major bank or a massive retailer, you have old on-premise systems.
Like proprietary mainframes from the 1990s.
Yeah. And they do not speak modern API languages. You cannot just create a magical shortcut to a 30-year-old mainframe.
So what do?
You have to build custom, lightweight extraction layers to bridge the old world and the new world. It takes work.
Right. The fabric is only as good as the threads you can weave into it.
Yeah.
What else is stalling these projects out?
The second massive hurdle is missing metadata and semantic complexity.
Oh boy.
Remember we said the fabric needs active metadata to learn? Well, it needs a clean baseline to start learning from. A lot of organizations completely stall out because they try to boil the ocean.
They try to organize everything at once.
Exactly. They try to catalog every single piece of data they've accumulated over 20 years before they even launch the fabric. Furthermore, defining the semantic layer is a brutal business alignment challenge.
Which is really just a fancy way of saying human corporate politics, right?
Basically, yeah.
Because the AI cannot code a technical solution if the VP of sales and the VP of finance refuse to agree on what the term active customer actually means in the boardroom.
That is the painful reality of it. It is rarely a technical failure. It is almost always a consensus failure.
That makes a lot of sense.
Then you have skill gaps. Historically, data engineers focus strictly on building pipelines, just moving data from point A to point B. AI engineers focus purely on training models.
And now they have to work together.
An AI-driven fabric requires both of these skill sets to merge and work on the exact same architecture simultaneously. That clash of cultures, priorities, and tooling is a very real friction point inside IT departments today.
And then there's the biggest hurdle of all for 2026, which is governing agentic AI.
Yes, the trust issue.
It's one thing to have an AI suggest a strategy on a dashboard. It is entirely different to hand the keys over to a self-driving enterprise. How do our clients at Kanerika actually build enough trust to let an operations agent execute a supply chain pivot without a human frantically hitting the approve button?
It's a huge leap for most companies. Trusting autonomous AI in production comes down to two highly governed mechanisms: semantic grounding and clear escalation thresholds.
Okay, let's look at semantic grounding first.
So because the agent is operating within the fabric, every single decision it makes is based on explicitly governed, semantically defined data. It isn't pulling assumptions from the open internet, you know? It is mathematically grounded in your company's actual reality.
That definitely helps. What about the escalation thresholds?
This is the more important part. You define the parameters beforehand. You establish hard-coded policies that say, for example, the operations agent can reroute shipments or authorize purchases up to $50,000 autonomously.
But anything over that?
Exactly. Any action over that dollar amount automatically pauses the system and triggers a human review.
So the trust is actually built into the infrastructure itself. It's not a leap of faith. It's a defined perimeter.
Precisely. The fabric provides a provable, immutable audit trail for every single action the agent takes, making the entire system transparent to compliance teams.
And this is exactly why navigating these hurdles requires expert guidance. I mean, trying to duct tape this together internally with siloed teams is just a recipe for stalled projects and blown budgets.
It really is. We've seen it happen.
And it's why we at Kanerika have a 98% client retention rate. We understand the technical debt, we have the FLAP accelerators to bypass all that manual coding, and we are fully backed by ISO 27001 and SOC 2 certifications.
We take the security side very seriously.
Absolutely. Our teams are ready to step in and turn your scattered, fragmented data into real-time, autonomous insights. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, what is the core takeaway our listeners should keep in mind?
If we pull back from all the technical architecture and the case studies we discussed, the core takeaway from all of this content is this. The gap between a really cool prototype AI demo and reliable production-grade AI is purely a data infrastructure
The
problem.
models are ready.
They have been ready. The AI-driven data fabric is the critical bridge that actually gets your enterprise ready to use them.
We've talked a lot about the math, the architecture, and, the bottom line savings today. But there's a human element to this shift that we really need to chew on as we close out. Do you have a final thought our listeners should walk away with?
I do, and it raises a deeply philosophical question about the future of business leadership.
I love these. Lay it on us.
If we successfully build this architecture, if the data layer becomes entirely autonomous, where it is cleaning, organizing, and defining its own business context perfectly in real time, what happens to the traditional role of human intuition in business strategy?
Oh, wow.
Right. The gut instinct CEO has been romanticized for a century. But in 5 years, will we end up trusting the fabric's mathematically perfect context more than our own gut instincts?
That is wild to think about. When the data is perfectly contextualized and the AI can essentially see the entire board at once, maybe the old gut instinct actually becomes a liability instead of an asset.
It's definitely something to think about.
That is a fascinating thought to end on. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Make sure to reach out and connect with us at Kanerika to critically assess your own AI readiness and see how the data fabric can transform your operations. Thanks for listening to The Digital Shift.